Seaport District of New York City. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby, presented by Chase. Jalen Rose. There are some whispers. There are some rumors from Bleacher Report that Ben Simmons and the Sixers are not seeing eye to eye this offseason, so much so that they haven't really been communicating like they normally do during the offseason. Obviously, Simmons was offered in a trade for James Harden, and then once the Sixers season was over, there are a lot of rumors about him leaving town. Jalen, what does this tell you about the Simmons-Sixers relationship?
Basic professional etiquette 101. If your job or your boss reaches out to you that happens to be paying you millions of dollars, you should return the call. Just normal protocol. But in all honesty, I feel like this relationship is going to end with Ben Simmons ultimately being traded. I think that's why he's not necessarily returning their calls, because he knows that they're shopping him. And the one thing about getting traded, and you know I can relate because I've been moved multiple times, is sometimes you see it coming, and then also before it happens, people assassinate your character. Then they say things like this that people don't know if they're true or not. So the fans that you do have are not upset that you got moved. It's a weird mental gymnastic that happens in professional sports. But with that being said, the way he performed in the playoffs, in their final series, and particularly his lack of productivity in the fourth quarter, you can't have him and Joel Embiid being your two best players and feel like that you're going to contend for a championship. When they're at their best, they occupy the same space on the floor, the colored area.
I really think that if he were to be traded to another team, it would be mutually beneficial for both franchises. I'm big on Ben Simmons, and I would definitely be in the market for him were I a GM around the league. I think he's extremely productive. He is the second vote-getter and Defensive Player of the Year, the second best defender in the entire league, a great passer, has great vision, and without Joel Embiid on the floor, there's another team, another chemistry, another offense for him in which he will be very successful. And I also understand maybe he doesn't want to talk. They literally offered him in a trade already. Once the buzzer was over in the Hawks series, they put him on 17 different teams in the media. I understand why he feels a certain way, and I hope that for him and the Sixers, that this ends up in a fair trade for both teams.
Everything you say is A+ spot on, my brother, and I want to add to that. The Philadelphia 76ers, in theory, are the only team that have an anchor post player like Joel Embiid that requires them to run their offense that way. If you look around the league, the floor is normally spread. And a guy like Ben Simmons now, who embodies positionless basketball, is able to take advantage of his athleticism, his quickness, his speed, and his ability to finish. But if you have Joel Embiid, of course you need to feature him. And so that's the dilemma that they have. He's their franchise player. Ben is going to end up somewhere else. And I, like you, know that he's going to ball when he gets to his next destination. He's going to do work at his next destination. So everybody that get a chance to assassinate his character and talking about how he's spending his offseason and talking about how much a house that he's hanging out in California costs, all of that is irrelevant. When the season starts and or when Ben Simmons get traded, trust me, he's going to go somewhere else and do work and still be an all-star level player.
Absolutely, and I'm going to be a die easy fan of that team no matter what team it is in the National Basketball Association. Jalen Rose, moving on to a player that you always have some insight on, and that is a trade between the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. And I say Jonas Valanciunas because you know that Jonas Valanciunas was very important to the Grizzlies' success this season. He is now going to be on the Pelicans. Steven Adams and a pick move to the Grizzlies. Mr. Rose, what do you think the real significance of this move is?
To open up the floor for Ja Morant's ability to drive. Kind of like what we just said indirectly about Joel Embiid. Valanciunas has been a productive big, right? A double-double guy that could get you a couple of blocks. For me, he was this season their third most important player behind Ja Morant, and you know how much I like Dylan Brooks, and I'm glad he made this name for himself. And so on paper, it's a little head scratching initially. On paper, This is a little head scratching because Steven Adams ain't going to give you the offense. He hasn't given the productivity recently. Eric Bledsoe, when the Pelicans moved on from him, when the Bucks moved on from Eric Bledsoe, they only went and won the championship with Drew Holiday. And so it to me seems more of a salary dump to try to acquire more assets. And I'm not overall upset at it for either team. Zion's going to need a guy to play alongside of that's taller than him, that can get some post offense. But late in games, here's what I want you to watch for. Who do the Pelicans have on the floor? That's the key, because to me, when Zion is at his best, he's point center. I've been talking about his handle. I've been talking about his passes since Duke. I don't necessarily see him and Brandon Ingram falling into the roles of traditional 3, traditional 4 with Valanciunas at the 5. I don't think that gives them enough spacing, in particular with those two big guys late in games. So it's going to be interesting to see how Willie Green navigates that. But overall, I think they were just trying to build out their roster and get more assets and ultimately keep Zion happy. That's what you're trying to do.
And the Pelicans do have some more cap space getting off the Bledsoe and the Steven Adams contracts. Jalen self for Detroit. And now, your countdown crew brother, Adrian Wojnarowski, took his Twitter fingers out and tweeted this. I can't believe I'm reading this. Detroit's internal meetings are still revolving around 3 players for the number 1 pick on Thursday night. Cunningham, Green, Mobley. Sources tell ESPN Detroit isn't fully there yet on committing to Cunningham with the first overall choice. What are they doing, Jalen? What are they doing? This is so dumb. Just why play these mind games? Commit to Cade, draft Cade, move on with your franchise. What is happening here, Jalen Rose?
I like your approach, and I agree with your mentality. But when they're in the position that they're in, you got to field these calls. Somebody might call with a deal that you can't turn down. I get that. But ultimately, I believe he's going to be the pick. But here's what happens sometimes in workouts too, Jacoby. If you notice when we're watching Cade's highlights, they're not necessarily high flying, right? They're not like oohs and ahs above the rim. He's actually a skilled basketball player that does it in all facets, right? And so what ends up, I'm pretty sure happening, you get in some of these workouts with these freak athletes like Mobley and Jalen Green, and all of a sudden these pogo sticks have you like, oh man, hold on. Like, wait a minute, are we sure about this? That's just how the game works. But I think cooler heads are going to prevail. I think he ultimately becomes the number 1 pick. And you and I have mentioned this. It's one thing to have the top pick. It's another thing to have a consensus player to take.
Yes.
Cade Cunningham is that player for this draft.
I'm concerned about this for the Pistons because, you know, I don't love the Pistons, but I love you and you love the Pistons so much that I'm forced to deal with them. And if they mess this up, I'll be so upset because I know you're working the draft. If they don't pick Cunningham at number 1, you're going to walk off the set. You're going to walk off the set. You'll be at my crib like 10 minutes after the number 1 pick if they don't draft Cunningham. This is such a no-brainer. Detroit Pistons organization, do it for the city. Do it for the team. This is a player that you can build around. There are other impressive prospects in this draft. I understand that. But keep your eyes on the prize. Draft Cade Cunningham number 1. Please, please, for Jalen Rose. Moving on, it is time to show me some Shohei. Shohei Ohtani